Hey folks, I'm getting about ready to start the webinar here, and I think we're also recording. Let me bring myself off of video mute and see if that works. Oh, look, it does. Thanks for joining. This is Office Hours. As usual, a pre-format, a little warning about what Office Hours is. It's always pretty casual, right? We've got a couple folks in the engineering department on. We've got a few topics that we're going to lead in with. But the reality is this is your time. It's an office hours. I even have lunch here. I'm probably going to eat pizza. There's just nothing you can do about it. My name is Jordan. I'm part of the solution engineering team here in the United States. And the other half of our department is Tracy Walker, who is also on the line, but his camera is muted. As is usual, we're going to roll out, I'm going to probably read your release notes a little bit about some stuff that dropped in NeuVector 4.2.1 and 4.2.2. Of course, we'll have some open discussion. We do have at least one sort of topic of the week. There's been moderate levels of panic about, that pod security policies are being deprecated in future versions of Kubernetes. And it's going to be okay. Not only does NeuVector have your back, but we have your back in the form of, we didn't just invent something new here. We've always been doing it. And there's some upcoming events, some reviews, and we had a couple of sort of, frequently asked questions that we get from the field that come in. But again, we'll want your participation as we roll in. And if you have any questions, soon we'll be taking folks off of mute. If you're not the lean into the microphone kind of person, hit up that Q&A part of the Zoom webinar, and we'll try to drop that in there for you. So this isn't everything. That's kind of a screenshot from the release notes. Wanted to point out the version 4.2.1, we got that out right after 4.2.0 dropped. There were some weird things going on with the user interface, not any functionality at the back end. So that came rolling out. 4.2.2 has got a little bit more power to it. You see my bullet points across the top. I did want to point out that we've now started, and we're going to be building on this. There are password policy enforcement options built into NeuVector. So, when you can set it up so that your environment doesn't allow people to just go admin all day long. You can force them to do things that they were supposed to do. More about expiration, length of passwords, complexity, things like that are built into the platform. So, and common access card from SAML ADFS. This was, of course, driven by you, the end users, to put inside the platform. Both of these are RBAC user access control enhancements that are inside of the platform, of course, driven by you, the end users. And part and parcel with that is we take criticism well. Please look at them. We highly encourage you to do rolling updates when you see releases of NeuVector. So a lot of times there might even be some minor bug fixes. Look for those on the documentation. Check to do those rolling updates. And if you have any problems getting from whatever version you are, or concerns about getting from wherever you are to the next version, please let us know. Reach out to us on this call. Open a ticket with our ever-friendly support team. We try to make sure that we get all those requests in the latest versions as fast as we possibly can. I'm not going to read you the rest of those. You're able to read things, generally speaking. But I do want to get on with kind of the topic of the month, the week, the topic of today that we want to push out. And that is that pod security policy being deprecated in Kubernetes. I think 1.2.0 it starts to roll out. And I think 1.2.2 it stops being backwards compatible, but you can read the Kubernetes docs as it is. One of the things about pod security policies is that they are very powerful ways to exercise security inside of Kubernetes, but that's kind of a thing that's kind of left to concentrated security vendors like us. NeuVector's already been doing that for years and years, and we started working. There's a preview of the matrix that mostly Tracy, thank you, Tracy, has been working on to help clarify how to map some of those PSPs and do those things inside of Kubernetes. I knew someone, there it is. Tracy said, PSP is deprecated in 1.2.1 and utterly removed in 1.2.5. Thank you, that's the roadmap. We're trying to get these things mapped out to if you were using PSPs and solely relying on them, if you're brand new to NeuVector, or if you need to go back to people and people are running around in their office going, oh God, PSPs are gone, what do we do? You can say, relax, we have NeuVector. With that being said, Tracy, I'm probably going to unshare and let you share the live version of this matrix and any thoughts and warm feelings you have on this topic.
Be happy to.
There we go.
Are you able to see my screen? Excellent. Yeah, that was the cut and paste directly from the Kubernetes documentation there.
Yeah, let their docs speak for their docs.
Exactly. So pod security policy. So there is docs, go to the kubernetes.io. You can find the pod security policies right there. So this is all of the pod security policies that they implement. So one of the things that we find ourselves having to explain sometimes is within NeuVector. If you go to policy admission control, we often get questions around pod security policies and whether or not, how is this going to affect admission control within NeuVector?
Or
and this
which one should I use? Like, what if they overlapped and crashed with each other while I open a wormhole or shatter the time-space continuum?
Exactly. So the thing to understand about our admission control is that before an image gets deployed, the Kubernetes API will actually reach back out to our controller to say, should I deploy this image? And so that's when we get to use all of these criteria. So you'll notice like count of high severity CVEs. So those are not included in pod security policies. But we do have things like environment variables, that the image was scanned, compliance OS, that it came from a particular registry, had a particular label. So there's all kinds of pod security policies that you can apply here. And also notice when I apply, like, let's just say, I'm going to say that the image is one of something, whatever that criteria. Let's go foo here, and I'll add that. I can also add other criteria. So I can do compound criteria, add multiple criteria. Let's say I want to make sure there are no high severities with a fix, right? My developers can't fix things that don't have a fix. So let's keep the count of high CVEs, but I'm going to give my developers 2 weeks to make those fixes. So as soon as a fix gets published, they still have 2 weeks before we start denying that image gets added. So you hit the plus. So I can build these kind of rules here and make more complex rules for admission control. And all of this completely independent of the Kubernetes pod security policies. So you could actually be using both. You could be using NeuVector for pod security policies. You can be using Kubernetes, OpenShift, etc. So let's just say I'm going to add that one. That gets added. So this is kind of where we came up with, again, here are the control aspects, and see these field names. So the field name, if you were writing these in a YAML file, the field name is what you're going to be using to do that criteria match, right? So what we did is we took all of those criteria, threw them into a spreadsheet along with the field names. And what we did is we did a kind of a deep dive with our engineering to say, all right, what do we have that matches up one for one? And that's what you see in this column right here. So let's make this even just a touch bigger. So you can see that. So running of a privileged container, is it running as root? So we do run as privileged. That's one of our criteria. So these, in this column right here, the NeuVector admission control PSPs, these are the labels, the criteria that match one for one. And then we also, where you see field names not parsed, so we do parse those field names. And then these are the ones that we don't parse. So there's a handful, I think there's a total of 6 or 7 there that we don't, but we may have other criteria that can replace or that are more flexible or that we can use in conjunction with other variables. So you can see over here on the far right, this list here is all of the criteria that are not necessarily a one-for-one match. What we have found with many of our customers is they will usually start using the pod security policies that come within NeuVector because it's more of a superset. The fact that you can create these complex criteria and have multiple criteria in the same admission control rule. Again, if you have any questions about pod security policy, especially this right here, and so I apologize for going to our documentation, but it's really well documented. You notice here this mode, monitor and protect mode. So this again is another aspect that sometimes we find we have to kind of talk about, because we're used to monitor and protect mode in our runtime, right? Where we have discover mode, monitor mode, protect mode. So in the runtime environment, yes, we have the modes where we're going to alert you if there's anomalous activity, or we'll block it in protect mode, right? So admission control has its own monitor and protect. No need for a discover mode, because there they are. We've already discovered them, right? Mm-hmm. So you can set this to monitor and protect as well, to enable these. So you could still have an image get deployed, and you would just get a security alert saying, hey, that one had some CVEs, or it's running as root, or it didn't come from the registry that you said it was supposed to come from, those kind of things. So if you put it into protect mode, yes, Kubernetes will check with NeuVector. Is it okay to allow me scheduling this container to run? And if it doesn't pass those criteria, NeuVector will say, yeah, hold your horses on that one right there, cowboy. And that's where it'll stop, assuming
Tracy,
you're doing this from
operational
Texas.
Standpoint, could end users say, hey, I'm testing stuff in a dev test, I want to be in monitor mode, I want to fire that to my SIM so that I'm like, this looks right, and then have a cluster that's my production cluster and say, thou shalt protect here and not allow bad rules? And can I, get some little economy of scale by, again, that, learn on one side, deploy and operate on the other?
Absolutely. Yes, you could have the same rules in one environment set to monitor. You could have another rule set into, production cluster, those kind of things with the protect mode on, so that, yes, you're getting that same information earlier on. If we were to, like for our federation, right? So when we do federated clusters, there, let's take a look at admission control there. So notice here, I'm not necessarily, I'm not defining monitor or protect mode in my admission control here. So if I'm setting up these criteria that I'm going to deny, or have some criteria for, like, say, send me an alert on high severity CVEs, or a particular CVE name, right? That I want to say if it equals or contains CVE 2020 dash, some number. Yeah, we'll continue, we can check for those and make that across all of those clusters. So we can push those rules down. And then the individual clusters, you can also have rules that are in that monitor protect mode.
And you could CRD this stuff too on a group by group layer as well. Not from here, but from the regular screen.
You mean from this control right here?
Yeah, if you went to groups and had admission control rules.
No.
Okay.
No. So the CRDs that we do, the security as code.
I just want to make sure that everybody knew that those are different streams, and we're not crossing the streams like in Ghostbusters.
Yes, don't cross the streams. Yes. So in the CRDs, when we do the security as code, we are collecting the process file and network rules and the policy mode. So the security as code, it doesn't require that the clusters are connected or federated in any way. Air-gapped environments, you can, export the rules for any number of containers, export that as a group policy. You can export it in a different mode. So again, it's including the process file and network rules and the policy mode. Let's just take a quick example. Save that there. So this YAML file, and since we're in office hours and we're being a little bit casual about this, again, one of the most important aspects of being able to take security learned in one environment and apply it to another environment, we were mentioning UI enhancements. So you won't get this group down here until you have checked the box, right? I can select the line to see what's going on with process profile rules, and it'll change all the tabs down here, but you're not going to get this information until you click on the box and select to export those group policies, switch the modes, etc. So some of that intuitive type stuff are feature requests coming in the new UI user interface. Any questions in the chat from anyone about
folks,
using
QA is open. You also have the power to unmute thyself if you wanted to come up here and ask questions about the PSP things. About how important that is to everybody too.
Are there other topics that you would like to ask questions on? We can handle those as well.
Well, then I'll throw one at you. Because I think, Tracy, we saw this one come in recently, and there was a question about, so when you're looking at a repo and scanning images, there's that ability to scan periodically. And, you remember the question as well, right? How do you clarify what gets scanned at that periodic scan? What's different about the scan that happens when the CVE database is updated automatically? How do I compare and contrast that against, say, a manual fire off of a scan coming from, say, my CI/CD tools? How does all that interface work together?
Yes, great question. So let's talk about the registry scanning first, because when we add a registry, one of the components here is this periodic scan. And so this question came around, well, so what does this mean? So I can schedule a scan of my registry based on a filter, so that I can do a scan every 5 minutes, or I can do a scan every 20 hours or up to 7 days, right? So between 5 minutes and 7 days, I can do an interval to rescan everything in this environment. So what does that mean? Well, when we do a scan of a registry, we do keep a cache, and I learned this today. We keep a cache of everything that was scanned. Mm-hmm. We will only rescan if the CVE database changes. So if the database is updated nightly, we're going to scan at least every night, right? Because if it's a fresh CVE database, rescan everything. In between those times, if you're not updating every single day, maybe you're updating the CVE database once a week. Maybe it's in an air-gapped environment and it's a manual process because you've got to take a USB stick or something like that. Regardless, anytime anything changes in that registry, if a new image is added or things like that, we're not going to scan it until that periodic scan, right? So if a new image gets added, I think that's right. Correct me if I'm wrong, but we will scan that image. So for example, this morning, I rebuilt an image in this environment, and you can see right here. So notice that everything was scanned on April 25th, except for this new image that I deployed, and that new image was scanned this morning.
Well,
right?
Let me make a point right here too, right? So you notice that you've got there's a little gap there. And in case somebody's worried, you could certainly set up an admission control rule that says, hey, if somebody tries to deploy an image that hasn't been through the scan yet, react in some way, including stopping it.
Exactly. So we will know if this image was scanned from a registry. We've created a hash that says, yes, we know what image that is, and we can validate that it has been scanned and that it meets those criteria, et cetera. So as you can see, when I added this new image, we did not rescan the entire database. We only scanned the images that got added to that. So that's why there's not, we don't have to really schedule a scan beyond, the frequency, 5 minutes to 7 days, because it's going to be taken care of automatically. That is different than if we're scanning containers. You can't schedule a scan of containers that are running live, right? There is no schedule. So these containers get scanned immediately as soon as you turn on scanning and have the license, and we will scan everything in that environment. And then if any image changes, we will rescan that immediately as well. If the CVE database changes, we will update that as well. So we have a continuous bubble, essentially, that if anything comes in or out, the CVE database changes, et cetera. That's what triggers rescans within that bubble. If I were to turn the scanning off, even for a few seconds, and turn scanning back on, I will cause us to rescan everything because that bubble was broken, right? And for that very small period of time, we don't know what's changing when you turn the auto scan back on. And as you can see, everything gets rescheduled, and then we're quickly rescanning everything in that environment.
Layers like an onion.
Hopefully I did not make that more confusing with that long explanation.
Was it better or was it worse? But that's actually a good point, because we do get periodic, rubbing of the chin from folks. Like, if I left a gap here, and the reality is NeuVector actually, there are places where there's even overlap of just that vulnerability management.
Right. Or we'll just get asked, I don't know where to set the schedule for scanning my runtime containers. Where's the schedule? How do I make sure that this is not scanning when we're running live in production? We would prefer to scan overnight and things like that. Well, one, we have minimal impact to those running containers because we're ingesting the image into our own scanner. So that helps minimize impact to their running containers. But also, we're only scanning when necessary, when something has changed, the CVE database has changed. So if you're updating the database in the middle of the night, that is a good way to also coincidentally trigger those overnight scans when things are not quite as busy.
And not to mention the already existing overarching network protections and process protections that are in NeuVector. So defense in depth, layered and layered.
Any questions or anything that anyone's tripping over? Any UI improvements that anyone would like to see as we're making, there's a lot of UI improvements coming, a little bit of a UI refresh. So if something comes to mind that you would like to see improved, please do shoot us an email.
Or any questions about deployment or getting it running in any other environment, let us know. With that, I think that I will bring us back to this right here. There was your matrix, and you heard Tracy kind of drop in a little bit about the UI. We are actually working on a complete redressing. The decorators are in and hammers are being hammered on a refresh of our user interface.
Ripping
I
out
don't
the
even have a
shag
chance to
carpet.
show you that refresh yet, but it's coming. We'll probably do a webinar, and then probably the next office hours. I guarantee you, like, look at all the pretty things. But like Tracy was kind of encouraging here, like I said, we take criticism well. Get those requests in, like, hey, I found this weird, or this icon didn't make sense to me, or this font looks different than this font. We try to scope those things out, but products always need to be improved. Not only the underlying power and architecture, but just the way it comes to you on the front of the screen. So that's coming soon. As we head out, KubeCon EU is next week. We are a sponsor. We're going to be there if you're in the European Union or up at that time. You want to attend that? Well, we will be there answering questions, doing things live. Sometimes like these, it's sort of fun to troll when other people are asking questions going, I never thought to ask that. Would also like to mention,
and we do have passes available if any of our attendees for attending the office hours. Yes, we'll give you a free pass. I'm sure of it.
Come on in there, like popcorn at the fair. I wanted to put a little note on the screen that we've done several great webinars recently. Last week we did infrastructure as code in a secure way using Terraform. Very educational. I know I personally learned a lot from it. We've posted that on our website and on our YouTube page, along with recordings of some of the other webinars. So we're trying to get you content that some of it's small, some of it's in depth. Again, the Terraform talk was really, really good. Of course, accepting feedback on that soon. Press release isn't out yet, but we're really proud that NeuVector is part of the IBM Cloud Catalog. So what that means is not only just the obvious that it's part of the catalog and you can deploy NeuVector into your IKS environments. It also, if you're one of these larger IBM customers that has this collective spend, I forget the name of it, but if you're using it, you know what it is. That can be part of that easier purchase when you're doing those big commitment spends. NeuVector is able to easily roll up inside of there, and obviously it's very quick and automated to get that running inside of IKS and other Kubernetes platforms that are running on IBM Cloud. And that's all I had on the parting thoughts comments. If anybody else has any other questions about anything really related to Kubernetes security or container security or NeuVector or anything else, speak up now. Drop it in the chat, the QA, or take yourself off mute. And if I got silence as compliance, I might move to adjourn this session of NeuVector Office Hours with our thanks for joining. And if you're listening to this on the recording, as I'm reaching forward into the future, join us live next time. We're here for you.
Thanks for
Thanks,
stopping
everybody.
by.